As we mentioned earlier, and as we well remember, on the evening of June 17th, a young man entered the historic Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. He took part in the regular Wednesday evening Bible study group. He was welcomed as a friend. He was given a place of honor next to the pastor. And we all know what happened next, although it still seems impossible to comprehend. The news brought shock and despair. It was a horrifying and overtly racist crime. On the very same evening, at the very same hour, my wife Haley and I, and our cantor Dan Sklar, and about a half dozen other members of our congregation entered another African Methodist Episcopal church, Bethel AME in Bridgeport. We were there because Temple Israel is proud to be part of Connect, which stands for Congregations Organizing for a New Connecticut. Connect is an alliance of about 30, perhaps even 40 by now, congregations across Fairfield and New Haven counties. It includes mostly churches, but there are a few synagogues, and there are congregations in urban neighborhoods and suburban neighborhoods, congregations that are mostly white, others that are largely black, some that are Latino. We gathered at Bethel AME that June evening for a conversation about community policing. A couple hundred people filled the church. The mayor, the chief of police, and all the top brass of the police department, they sat on the dais, along with Reverend Bernadette Hickman Maynard. She and her husband, Teddy, serve as co-pastors of Bethel AME, and we are thrilled to have them and their whole family with us this morning. The community dialogue that night, I would describe it as respectful but pointed. It had a clear purpose. One by one, members of Connect congregations stepped forward to tell painful stories about their interactions with the Bridgeport police and to ask questions, important questions, of the city leaders. I speak about our involvement in Connect, not to congratulate us for being progressive or for doing good. We are part of Connect because we recognize that we are all in this together, all of us. In addition to community policing, Connect is addressing the cost of health care and gun violence and immigrant rights. I would love for all of you to become part of Connect. It's a concrete, inspiring, and challenging opportunity to get to know our neighbors across the religious and ethnic spectrum. I invite you to join us in seeking common solutions to common challenges. Community policing matters to all of us, not just those who live in Bridgeport. Over the past year plus, we've witnessed the death of unarmed young black adults at the hands of police in Staten Island, Ferguson, Baltimore, Texas, Ohio, and elsewhere. Certainly, these deaths fall into a different category from those in Charleston. They are not part of a racist campaign for white supremacy. And moreover, I'm not a police officer. I can only imagine the dangers that our brave officers face on a daily basis. But in certain situations, the use of force has been excessive. The trend should concern us all. In witnessing these incidents this year, and through my participation in Connect, I have learned something important this year. I thought I understood the issue of race in America. Part of me was idealistic to believe that because we had twice elected a black president, certain boundaries had been overcome. But I was naive. I didn't have a clue. Given the events of this year, I now understand inequality in our country in a way that I never did before. I think many of us do. No longer can we claim that we don't know what goes on. No longer can we pretend to be ignorant of the way minorities are treated by some police officers. In certain quarters, the respect and value given to black lives simply doesn't match that given to white lives. No longer can we hide from the disproportionate effects of our criminal justice system on minorities. Rates of arrest, indictment, and conviction are far, far higher, and sentences are far harsher for minorities. No longer can we deny that our incarceration system wreaks untold damage on minority communities. It's okay, it's the sound of life. Sadly, our prisons are filled with young black men who, even if they get out, often find themselves undereducated and unemployable. Simply put, there are structures of racism in our society. We benefit from them, often unwittingly. Others suffer under them, and that's just wrong. And I know it's not the society that any of us want to live in. Are we uncomfortable enough? Yeah. I'm aware that this is among the most difficult issues we can talk about. But on this, the most important of days, we have no choice. I do not think that there is a single person in our congregation who is racist. I believe that if a black family bought the house next door, any of us would welcome them without reservation. At the same time, I also firmly believe in the message of our prophets as summarized by Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. Indifference to evil is worse than evil itself. In a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible. We are all complicit in the structures of institutional racism that plague our nation, and therefore we are all responsible. Today, I want to make a confession of my own. Moving to Connecticut has made me more uncomfortable about the issues of race than I ever was before. When I lived in Manhattan, I saw people of all skin colors and ethnic backgrounds all the time on the sidewalks, subways, and buses. You know, one encounters the entire vast range of humanity. And those of you who commute to the city are part of that diversity every day. It's one of the things that makes New York City such an interesting and vibrant place. And I was proud to be part of it. And now we live here. Westport's population, 93% white. Weston is 96% white. I've noticed that my mindset, my assumptions have changed. A few months after we moved to Connecticut, I surprised myself with my own thoughts. I noticed a person of color walking through a residential neighborhood, and I asked myself, does he belong here? What's he doing here? And I would guess I'm not the only person in this sanctuary who has had those thoughts. And yet I was appalled. I was appalled at the assumption I had made that a person did not belong in a certain neighborhood simply because of the color of their skin. Did I become racist all of a sudden? I certainly hope not. But the context in which I exist had changed. All of us who live here know that we've chosen to live in a bubble. I'm not condemning this bubble. We have a very nice quality of life. Haley and I could not be happier here. But we all recognize that there are ramifications to the choice we've made. From time to time, as I speak with parents in our congregation, I ask them about the most important concerns that they have for their children. And they often speak of the unintended effects of living in this bubble. We know that we are incredibly fortunate to raise our kids in an environment of abundance. We're thankful that so many of us are able to give our children whatever they might need to succeed. But most importantly, we want to give our kids the things that money can't buy. We want to teach our children empathy. We want them to understand the feelings of others who are different. We want to teach our children compassion. We want them to see that not everybody grows up in a place like this with lovely homes and healthy restaurants and good schools and opportunities galore. We want them to know that there are people who live nearby whose lives are very different from ours. And we want to teach our children humanity. We want them to connect to a diversity of experience and outlook and opinion. And we know that doing so will add richness and depth and wisdom to their lives. It will make them more human. Throughout our history, we Jews, of course, were the ones who were different. We were the outsiders, strangers to the dominant culture. Dozens of times the Torah reminds us that we know what it felt like to be a stranger because we were treated as strangers in the land of Egypt and many other places. Meanwhile, today, here in the United States, we certainly don't feel like strangers. We don't feel like a minority. We aren't treated as second class. That's certainly because of our attainment of educational and professional success. But it's also a result of America's growing acceptance of difference. And yet, most of us don't choose to wear our difference visibly. There aren't too many people here with black hats or fringes. We can blend in if we choose to. One of the reasons that I wear a kippah is that I want to stand out. I don't want to blend into the rest of white America. I want to declare that as a Jew, I have a different history, a different perspective, a different set of values. Part of my obligation as a Jew is to ensure that just as my family has been able to succeed in this country, so too other families can succeed as well. Especially given our history, we have a responsibility to learn what it feels like to be a minority in this country today. It's an ironic thing for me to say, I know, that we need to learn what it feels like to be a minority. But it's also important to note that the Jewish community is changing rapidly. We can no longer assume that we know what a Jewish person will look like. On occasion, I've been told I look Irish. Now, looking Irish doesn't exactly count for racial diversity, but it does speak to the assumptions that we bring to the table. Day by day, the racial diversity of the Jewish community is growing, and that is a good thing. Every single person who joins our community, every child born or adopted, each spouse brought into a family, each person who chooses to become Jewish adds vitality and creativity to our community. They will be an integral part of writing the next chapter in the story of our people. Reverend Anthony Bennett of Mount Airy Baptist, also a Connect congregation in Bridgeport, spoke on this bima in January. His passionate call for black and white, Christian and Jew to work together was inspiring. It was also eerily similar to the sermon that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered on this bima back in 1964. 51 years later, and we're still having the same conversation. The conversation will change when we care for young black and Hispanic kids as we care for our own. We react with shock when we hear that an 18-year-old was shot in a white neighborhood, but too often we are indifferent when we hear news that an 18-year-old was shot in a black neighborhood. The conversation will change when we make ourselves a part of it. We talk about beginning dialogue across racial and ethnic boundaries, but often we don't know where to begin. For us, Connect is the answer. But let's be clear. The purpose of dialogue is not self-congratulation. Dialogue is a way to start working with others. And it's real work, real listening, real candor that leads to real collaboration. That's the only way we can make real change on the issues that strain our nation. The conversation will change when we enable our children to get to know children from other neighborhoods in a way that benefits all involved. Some of our parents and teachers are coming together to work on ways that Temple Israel can build bridges with other ethnic and religious communities nearby. I'd love for you to be a part of that too. Here at Temple Israel, we are fortunate to have a very productive relationship with the Westport Police Department. We trust them. Anytime we've needed them, they've been here for us. This is a department that serves our community very well. And that's why I want to work with our friends in the department to make sure that a Ferguson, a Baltimore, a Staten Island will never occur here. I know that we are a congregation of empathy, compassion, and humanity. Empathy requires that we understand the lives others live. Empathy calls us to really listen to their stories, to their daily struggles, to the concerns that they have for their children too. Compassion means that we acknowledge the struggles of others. I will never know what it's like to be followed down the aisles by store employees as I browse, or to be pulled over as I'm driving for no particular reason. But I do acknowledge that these patterns are real and painful. And living our full humanity requires that we help create the conditions in which others can lift themselves up. Living our full humanity means recognizing that we've been given a gift. But appreciating our good fortune is not enough. Now we have to do something with it. I believe that we here at Temple Israel can build the nation that we most want to live in, a nation that lives up to its founding principles of liberty and equality. The work begins today. Let's not waste a moment. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be so.
I see the same stars through my window that you see through yours, but we're worlds apart, worlds apart. And I see the same skies through brown eyes that you see through blue, but we're worlds apart, worlds apart. Just like the earth, just like the sun, two worlds together are better than one. I see the sunrise in your eyes that you see in mine, but we're worlds apart, worlds apart.
I see the same stars through my window that you see through yours, but we're worlds apart, worlds apart. And you see the same skies through brown eyes that I see through blue, but we're worlds apart, worlds apart. And just like the earth, just like the sun, two worlds together, two worlds are better than one. I see the friendship in your eyes that you see in mine, but we're worlds apart,
And if I'm for myself, then who'll be for me? When will we be for